Scorpio. Let me know if the audio is bad. I'm near some water. The title of the live stream is History Bending. It's a very important concept. If you think about when does news become history, and knowing what we know about news, what has it done to history? And history is pretty much collective agreement, lies agreed upon. Media is now lies agreed upon. And when I say agreed upon, obviously it's contentious. And nobody agrees on anything, but they agree on the big things. Both sides agree so-and-so got assassinated. Neither side agrees on how. But it's the points of agreement that matter. That's been the pattern. But lately, and I like this, there's a lot of debate, a lot of challenging of the premise that we set when we're talking about the meaning of media / psyop entrainment. And a couple of points here. One, the reason we're pointing this out is because it's objectively true. It's a pattern. We're just noticing it. Sometimes, like Inside Edition, notice the Netflix correlation with the crown jewels be stolen. Sometimes it's noticed by the media itself. So it's not even a question that it's happening. But what does it actually reveal about media architecture? Well, the fact that the history-bending psyops, that is, the simulated events that are inserted onto our timeline, the fact that these are attended by content in entertainment, contemporaneous content, reveals pre-planning, that the events were planned in advance because they necessarily would have preceded the creation of the content that mirrors them real time. We've been discussing a number of recent events, but they all fit the same pattern. So the predictive content or the concurrent content that you find in the entertainment reveals that these events are scheduled in advance, which is one of the central points that we've been making. And how far back does this go? But moreover, what does it reveal besides this? It reveals names. You can point to very specific writers and directors whose work has been co-opted for the purpose of our manufactured history. And I think that's why there's so much noise around this conversation, why there's so many of these very mystical or confusing or muddled explanations. And I think this is also the reason for the popularity of things like mud flood and Tartaria, where people are comfortable talking about ancient history being bent, my term, but history being fake, falsified, or even just fabricated. Yeah, sure, we can all talk about this, but really, at what point does news become history? What is the difference? The difference, from our perspective, practically speaking, is that we can isolate specific events that we've all lived through in our lifetime. There's less speculation. We can point to release dates and name names and correlate the work of these directors with specific simulated events. I mean, how many directors can we point to who've had a hand in the space program or in any of the mass shootings or terror attacks? I mean, we have the famous example of Stanley Kubrick, but that's just one. It's a psychological war, and the weapon is the camera. If you think about it, it's been an information war the whole time, which is why I coined the term PsyopEntertainment Complex. I said, forget about the military-industrial complex. That's just a feature of the movie. It's the psyop entertainment complex that's the real force in the world today. And it's not force in the way we think of force. If you think about guns, soldiers, tanks, military might. No, we're talking about the subtle force of total worldview warfare. I think Sun Tzu said the ultimate art of war is defeating the opponent without drawing a weapon. I mean, these are their ideas, is that you win in the minds. And so I've been thinking, though, we often talk about this relationship between the two. But why do they need to infuse the entertainment with this stuff? Would it work without it? Could they just do a 9/11 staged without any kind of support in the culture? Would it succeed as well? And I would hearken back to Edward Bernays and the understanding that he put forth regarding how to influence the mass mind, that you're really reaching them from irrational means. You get them in the emotions. If it were rational, you wouldn't need to be surreptitious about it. It wouldn't be a matter of a certain amount of exposure. Repetition is a huge part of advertising and propaganda. You see the same thing again and again. And one of the things that we talked about with the Charlie Kirk thing is how many movies in 2025, or how many examples did we point out that have the wound to that side of the neck with repeated themes, from the arrow in the neck of the guy in Americana to Ryan Routh attempting to stab himself in the neck with a pencil in the courtroom. And then, of course, you have the VP Kirk getting shot in the neck on Heads of State 2025, same actress who was next to Charlie Kirkland when he got shot in the neck. And then we have 2 neck wounds from the husband and widow in The Tempest. So just going through the list here, we're talking about concerted messaging, ideas that are saturating what is effectively an echo chamber. So one of my other points here, because they're putting stories in the culture to reinforce their history. It's what they're doing. And one of my points is that it's actually an echo chamber, that mainstream and alternative live in the same closed system. And so that's where we're coming at this. We're looking at, okay, media is part of a bigger operation, the purpose of which is to get everybody into a consensus worldview. And it's a global in scale. We were born in it. It's inescapable. And there is no platform for challengers to it. At one point, I kind of, as an analogy, I said it would almost be like being a small group of atheists within a theocratic society. Because it is tantamount to a religion. And it is that incontestable, because it is the power structure. What's up? Ribo Nation says his story. Yeah, his story, and he is Big Brother. George Glockington, plain decoded, sounds like rain. Actually, it's a fountain. I've been doing watercolors, and I just did a painting of someone's backyard with their permission, and they're going to hang it up and everything. But yeah, I'm doing yard portraits. So if you have a backyard that you want done in watercolor, I will sit in your backyard and paint it. King Ravana says, Michael Wan was just mentioning architects' media on his new video. I'd have to listen to that. I was just listening to a podcast with Celia Speaks and Armin Ra about historic models. Very interesting. They're talking about this guy, Archaics, and how arbitrary historic models really are if you think about it. Swiss Chalet here with the medical misinformation. Just kidding. Thanks for joining. Flozic, Penguinati Auto Hoaxer. Okay, so now here's the other part. We can all accept, everybody, when I say everybody, I mean, it's well understood that history does represent the interests of the influential, the powerful, the connected, that obviously it's somewhat exclusive. So you have to allow for some level of subjectivity in it. But what we're positing here is not that we just are given a varnished version of what happened. It's not just retroactive, but that history is in fact proactive now. And it is being proactively created through the means of mass media psychological operations. So when we say that news is being faked, we're not saying everything is fake, but there's a couple of caveats here. Because it's the fake events that dominate the news cycles, one. And then two, our daily news rests upon the edifice of all previous news cycles. And previous news cycles are all contaminated by fakery. So our entire worldview rests upon bent news and a bent history. And the divergence from the real thing is what we are kind of highlighting here, at least how they get there. How do they split objective reality into a subjective parallel universe collectively? How'd they get us into this big Truman Show? It's all about setting your point of view. And the point of view of the masses is what I call MSM, which means mainstream mediation, meaning that their entire worldview has been filtered by the mainstream version of events, the collectively accepted, which is a very broad category. It's a big tent. This cult is within a big tent. And the truthers exist within a subset. And this is a key point. Truthers never left the big tent. They just got swept into a corner. And they're running around these rabbit trails that I describe as well paved. They act like they're discovering new stuff because they're truthers. But no, they're on paved rabbit trails with shills doling out breadcrumbs. So they think they're getting closer to the truth. Who really killed Charlie? What's his name? It's like, it's the wrong question to ask. It's not a whodunit. You should be asking who put these rabbit trails down here and why. Well, it's so you don't get out of the big tent. That's why. No conspiracy theory will lead you off the world stage. It'll pull you deeper in. That's why the extremes of the political horseshoe, both on the far left and right, the woke and the red pill, or the J pill, that's why they are increasingly conspiratorial as they get to the fringes. The conspiracy theories seem to be some kind of intentionally created contrivance to keep the wandering minds, the wandering Trumans, the lost sheep, from exiting altogether. But they're very conspiratorial on both sides, because both far left and right have a central scapegoat. That's their oppressor. And it's all based on the idea, of course, of a recognition of a structural oppressor. What's up, good one day? Here is your wrench. Again, it's kind of late, so I don't know if your wrench is going to be delivered this evening, but sometime tomorrow afternoon, check your front porch for I think it's 18-inch blue titanium wrench. It'll have etched on the side, Infinite Plane Society. If it's not there, check your doorbell cam. A lot of those people will take stuff off your porch. All right, so we have 26 people here. So I just wanted to get into the point here of, why would they saturate? Because someone had said, I get the premise of what you're saying, but why do they need to put it into every single propaganda conduit? Because we're not just talking movies. It's movies, podcasts are huge now for this type of stuff. But books and video games are even bigger. So why do they need to saturate the media ecosystem with foreshadowing of future fake events? Well, it's because they are getting you to make up your mind in advance about how you feel about the event. And you can see examples of this, like the representation of Muslims as terrorists was a big thing pre-9/11. Even I recall some comedy skit by The Onion that revolved around suicide bombers, and it's like, okay, you can't say that anymore. So political correctness, obviously it's a form of mind control, but it's also about controlling public perceptions about this or that group or idea. So after 9/11, of course, when you think, hey, the threat of radical Islam is a big deal, it should be in movies more because it's a viable thing and it reflects reality. No, that's when it became politically incorrect. Interestingly, if you look, a lot of the terrorists in recent media have been of the white nationalist variety. And I would consider that to be what I'm talking about now. They're giving us stories so that when they fake something, it just seems expected. They're shaping our opinions in advance. And, yesterday I talked about this. This is a big one. You got to look at the contrast between Luigi Mangione and his Joker associations and Daniel Penny and his Batman associations. Because I had called out the Joker-Batman dialectic as it relates to media psyops back in 2019, when the Joker came up as this kind of a Marxist class warrior anti-hero, and then Batman, privileged, rich, fighting against the underclass in the subway, comes off as representing fascism or capitalism. So you have this kind of dialectic built into the plot with these two characters. And we saw the building association between Trump and Batman, a lot of intentional. I mean, these are, again, movies with the same directors that are represented in other areas where predictive programming elements are put into these movies, like with the Nolan brothers, Christopher Nolan, Jonathan Nolan. Both of them very pronounced within the nuke thing. And so I'm not predicting, oh, there's going to be a nuke next week. But what we're doing is we're reading the zeitgeist based on what is being promulgated by known contributors to PSYOP content, PSYOP reinforcement content. If you're a movie director and your work has been involved in very specific ways, in foreshadowing or even real-time aligning with some fake event, then all of the work that you're putting out there should be looked at as possibly an indicator, especially if it's heavily promoted. So there's no doubt that the public has been conditioned to accept the reality of impending nukes. Like when it happens, nobody's going to say, oh, that's not possible, or that's just way, no, they're expecting it. I mean, think about how many decades we've been inundated with UFO invasion stuff. But the conspiracy theorists have already been conditioned to accept that it'll be staged and fake. They've already put a bifurcation in that as well. Another one of our axiomatic statements has to do with the fact that if there's a big story, and if it's perfectly split down the political aisle on how you interpret it, yet you agree it happened, then it's fake. Swiss Chalet says, I think AI has been used to write the news for at least 30 years. Well, it may as well be. It may as well be. Okay, and I'm glad you bring this up, because if you want to understand better what I mean when I say points of view, okay, AI gives you a great example. ChatGPT's point of view would be center of the world stage, just right there, mainstream mediation, much like Wikipedia. Like, it represents the consensus. It's not going to go off world stage. It's not going to say, I think this event was fake. It defaults to the mainstream. If your default is to the mainstream, and most people will, because they can't prove it wrong, and they have accepted the burden of proof, then every opinion they have is going to be framed within that particular worldview. If they are conspiracy theorists, then everything that they get is going to have another perspective. But it's going to be built upon the same essential story. But it's kind of predictable. The output is predictable, in other words. Like, you know what you're going to get when you ask ChatGPT or you ask any AI, because it's based upon its knowledge base. So in other words, the point of view is really both it's the knowledge base and what you accept. And that's just the default, and it's not going to change. So it's just an idea here. It's just when you're thinking about points of view and why people arrive at their opinions in predictable ways, it's because of where they are positioned within the big tent. And the conspiracy theorists are all just walking down these really tired and worn trails. I'm just so bored with second shooter, third shooter. They're so predictable. But something else too. Mainstream and alternative are both what I consider to be passive. So you're passively accepting whatever's coming from your side. And by passive, I mean uncritically. And the mainstream you could look at as credulous, and the alternative as incredulous. And both incredulity and credulity are both passive. These aren't modes of interpreting information that require processing. It's just kind of a low information takes. Andrea says, we have no way of knowing how long they've had AI. Well, it depends on how you define AI. Like, I don't think it's that important of a concept to think that it might have been older, because it requires a knowledge base. I don't think you would need it. I think you just need, I mean, it's just, you just go from analog to digital. It's just intel. You just need to know what everybody's thinking, and that's not really that hard. We've always had spies, spycraft, and I think religion has always been essentially what media is. There for shaping the worldview of the masses. And I don't think you would have needed it, because the modern social media thing hadn't even existed yet. It wasn't like, especially before the movable type, how hard would it be to control history? It's kind of a monopoly. And that's what I'm saying right now, is that what we're looking at is a worldview monopoly. It's a duopoly. The media is a duopoly. You know, it's mainstream and alternative are part of the same thing. And this is given away by events like Butler, Pennsylvania. You look at these events where the magic trick is performed with full complicity of the media. There's no, you'll never see CNN calling out Fox, or Fox calling out CNN for promulgating some obvious hoax. That was one of the big awakenings for me. I was like, if the right-wingers, if even the NRA were truly against the gun grabbers, they would expose the psyops. But you notice they never do. Why is that? Why did Armalite pay out $73 million? Oh, I get it. Because it's a rigged game. And that was one of the main pushes of Alex Jones at the time, was they're going to get your guns. They're going to take your guns. Patriots with guns are the firewall against New World Order tyranny. So you're like a hero now because you have a gun. Which is total BS. It's like, I used to say, who cares if they want to take your guns? They've already taken your minds. What are you going to do, organize with a bunch of brainwashies? No. Oh, we've already been subdued and conquered. What's up, Let's Go? Says, hello, Raft. Jamarian May says, what is the occult meaning of 3-eye Atlas, third eye? Interesting. Third eye Atlas. You know, Atlas Shrugged, if you've read the book, it ends with a elite engineered, you could say, a group that stations themselves in a place called Atlantis, where they black everything out. They shut it all down. The whole book is about retreating from society, laying down the philosophic framework for the justification of it all, pulling the plug, and then going into darkness, and waiting until, I guess, hitting a reset button. I mean, to me, the implication is everyone cannibalizes each other and starves, but they go full-blown Mad Max. So Atlas Shrugs is the idea is he decides to stop holding up the sky. Let's Go says, have you seen JLB's latest video titled, Where is Off-World Stage? No, I haven't. I'll have to check it out. So the off-world stage perspective is a perspective that looks at news, entertainment, and our consensus worldview from the perspective that includes media fakery and the long-term cumulative effect of fake news on what we call history. And off-world stage perspective is a take that is both anti-pro and anti-anti. Complete conscientious objection to the Psywar, looking at media itself as a conduit for psychological operations. So I'm not taking sides. Media is a liar. And it has an ulterior purpose. It's not just there to inform us, but rather to conform us to a prefabricated worldview. Yeah, if anybody's seen the video, feel free to post a link. I'll take a look. Hopefully it's better than a straw man, because I am opposed to straw man arguments. I steel man people's arguments. And when you do that, you arrive at things that might indicate the thing is kind of erroneous. So, for example, there were some who would say the predictive programming elements in movies is the result of a simulation. Well, I'm like, okay, I don't think that's true for a lot of reasons, but let's just say it is true. If true, then every example that we have found of Netflix matching psyops is therefore proof of God. These are little miracles. It's like we've got a million Mandela effects on our hands. Like, we have more examples of the simulation tampering with reality than the Mandela affected people have of documented Mandela effects. So that makes us, like, I don't know, the chosen ones of the simulation to be receiving this information. And I should be looked at as some kind of a high priest. I'm directly in touch with the simulation God. Look, here's my evidence. But all of a sudden now, they don't see that as evidence of their simulation. Like, what happened? What happened to mystifying this stuff? It's because it was propaganda the whole time. But the Steelman argument says, if true, then these other things would also be true. And these other things might just be ridiculous. Andrea says, it's insulting that they give you a sticker for voting as if you're a child. Really? The sticker is the only reason I vote. To me, it's worth it. I'll stand in line. I'll do it all. I want that sticker. Yeah, that's right. They also gave you a sticker for the pokey. And I'm not anti-pokey. I'm non. See, you don't have to be anti-anything. You can be non. Are you an anti-drinker, anti-smoker if you don't partake? No, you're probably just non. All right, now let's get back on track here. So the off-world stage perspective stands outside of the closed media echo chamber. And what it recognizes is the fact that it is an echo chamber, meaning, like, even Inside Edition said this with regard to the Netflix show Lupin. It said it has echoes of the robbery of the crown jewels. Now, someone had said, oh, another Netflix movie correlation, and they just cherry-picked like 50 movies about jewelry heists and said, hey, how come you're not looking at these ones? And I'm saying, because we don't cherry pick. We specifically look for the stuff that is concurrent, because you can't refute it. We narrow the range of possibilities. This isn't Texas Sharpshooter. We're just looking at the formulaic application of this echo chamber effect. And so what separates it, though, is it's not just that the Netflix show had an episode that mirrored the crown being stolen. It's that this is a repeated pattern, but also the crown jewels being stolen made international news. Everybody was talking about it. It's one of those things where, okay, it's being put on every screen. What's the reason? But second, the timing of it correlated with the No Kings protest. And in the show, they were stealing Marie Antoinette's necklace. So Marie Antoinette beheaded at a No Kings protest, essentially. So you not only have the Netflix and the news event matching, but you can also add in the worldwide protests and the essential theme. So now that's another layer to it. So that's what we're describing here. Like, this is a predictable pattern. And when I talked to fakeologists, I hadn't heard about the crown story, but I said the fact that it's so heavily promoted means it's likely part of a psyop, because they are, of course, always engineering events to steer our history along predetermined lines. And sure enough, as I've said before, if it's fake, you're going to find some Netflix or Hulu equivalent of it to make sure it reaches critical mass. And what did we see again? And it wasn't just us. Inside Edition and other media outlets have spoken about this. And Inside Edition said echoes of Netflix. Another point, off-world stage does not mean that you turn off your TV and you tune it all out. That would be uninformed, which you might argue is better than being misinformed, which is everybody else. But what I advocate here is taking the position of the informed disbeliever. So I'm not watching TV, the news media, I'm not consuming it as they are, but I'm watching more how the consumers are consuming it and what it's putting into their heads. They're being programmed. And so when I say they're being programmed, what does that mean? It means they're being conditioned to accept the program. The program being the list of fake events that will be inserted into our collective history. You're being subconsciously prepared for fake events when you're following the program. And that's why people react so hard. That's why they get emotional. How many people have thrown away their careers? I mean, pilots have been grounded, teachers fired, students expelled because they were cheering for the death of Charlie Kirk. Well, these people didn't think critically about it. They didn't arrive at the conclusion that it might have been a psyop, but rather they react as though it's true. Like, oh, it's on the screen. Let me go emote. If you harken back to the origin of skepticism, Piro, it described this process, which it had the word ataraxia, which I think is like quiescence, inner peace. And what they realized was that by suspending judgment repeatedly over events that may not be true and waiting for the facts to emerge, you actually liberate yourself from these knee-jerk reactions, reflexive reactions. And what that means is they achieve a state of inner peace. And I've noticed that truthers tend to be very panic-driven, screeching. Why aren't you active? You know, the ones who are getting in the streets, the ones who are running up the Capitol Hill, you know, the activists, they feel like you have to fight, fight, fight. And on the other hand, I'm saying, no, we should be in our ivory tower, in recliners. And we've been looked down on. We used to be looked down on for that. Maybe we still are. Some people say to me, like, you should be taking sides. And I'm like, I'm not going to take sides on anything in the political horseshoe. So yeah, some truthers who are fighting the info war see me as a draft dodger. Like, I'm contemptible, I'm a coward. But no, quite the opposite. Because if you really think about it, there has not been a break in this pattern. Jamiron May says, all part of the energy siphoning process. Well, we have limited bandwidth. And you could expend it all on some event. And the more people emotionally react and invest in something, the harder it is for them to detach from it later. You know, they become immersed in an alternate reality game, and good luck pulling out of it. Because that gets into the area of ego. One of the final guardrails. Many of those who get over the bloody guardrail are still held back by the ego. It's hard to admit that you've been lied to and duped. Wasn't hard for me though, because I broke away from religion early on. Like, you know, I realized, and it's just a little cynicism, I guess. But if someone's going to try to prove to us or demonstrate to us that we're wrong for rejecting the world stage as a perspective, as a starting point, they have a lot of work ahead of them, because our empirical research and recorded observations and our discussions over the years have all centered around the provable, demonstrable tampering with our collective history via the mechanism of fake news, aka psyops. And what really kills the coincidence explanation, for those who want to suggest that we're not actually unmasking psyop content in movies, the Erica Kirk conundrum is what they have to contend with now. So what is the Erica Kirk conundrum? Well, whenever we discuss these fake events, it is already implicit that we're talking about actors reading scripts. These are staged events, just like a movie, but they're just presented as real. Now, given that they are actors, nothing they say is coincidental. And if what they say perfectly matches what happened in yesterday's premiering #1 show on Netflix or Amazon, well, then you can say, okay, this fits the pattern. The characters in the movie are mirroring the supposed real-life character. And generally speaking, that's the pattern. But the thing with Erica Kirk is that she's the principal character in a psyop. And she hasn't just disappeared into the news cycle, but now she's an active part of the bigger story. Having taken over TP USA, she has a very public life now as far as her public appearances are broadcast. We all see them. So they've built up this character. So we can safely say that everything she's done since the assassination has been according to script. Now here's the problem for those who believe it's all coincidence, is that her character on the world stage has pretty much followed, scene for scene, her corresponding characters in Hulu's The Tempest, and of course we have these other examples. Snake Eyes, the Heads of State 2025, but specifically The Tempest. The Tempest really makes a big point too about how the widow is staging her grief now and may have been part of the plot. So there's some overlapping events that rule out that it's all just coincidental. Like, how is this character's script matching this Hulu character? You can't just say it's just a coincidence now. And if you can't say it's just a coincidence, well, then you have to supply the answer. Well, then what's behind it? And again, the long term, so for the last probably 20 years or something, the go-to explanation was, it's a higher than man thing. We can't understand it. Like, there's been almost this refusal to really think about the implications of it. But I think Occam's razor bears it out that the simplest explanation here is that the entertainment media is totally co-opted for the purposes of psychological warfare. And I think the reason why this topic has not been explored until the IPS think tank is because to explore it is to yield answers. And those answers could be very disruptive if they were thought about by a large number of people. Because again, we've all heard about sellouts. You know, when we think about sellouts, we just think about artists who've compromised their integrity for money, for fame, whatever. But what we're talking about here are directors whose work is provably connected to these simulated events. And by provably, I mean just the fact that their work is particularly aligned with it, with all the right components, means they're getting it from the same source. They're having psyop content, psyop reinforcement content put in their movies and books. That's a scandal, at a minimum, right? I mean, shouldn't it be scandalous to think that your favorite movie directors get some kind of a folder from the Central World News Services? Yeah, we need these elements in your movie. We need a symbolic this. We need, but these are the points. And this, what I'm describing now, is the observable pattern where it is predictable. The fact that this Louvre Museum robbery was mirrored in Netflix is something that we essentially predicted. Now, one of the greatest examples is Butler, Pennsylvania, because I can point to nearly a dozen or more very specific very popular movie entertainment examples of a Trump-esque character surviving a head wound or getting shot at. This is a very great example of both the predictive and the concurrent programming. And when we say something's fake or something's likely staged, we're not solely relying upon the visuals, because you can't always tell. We're looking at the wider media ecosystem, and one of the biggest indicators is real-time entertainment psywar reinforcement content. And the Trump one, almost unparalleled. Remember that movie poster, "Thine ears shall bleed"? But going down the list, you know, the Captain America, the Homelander season finale, you had the Batman Caped Crusader, you had the Mickey 17 one that's pretty big. Came a little bit after. Beetlejuice. We had the magazine covers that were even talked about by Laura Loomer. But the media environment was increasingly saturated with it. Francis Ford Coppola with Megalon, Make Rome Great Again, with a Trump-esque character survives an assassination attempt. I mean, I was looking at A Man in Full, repurposed to represent Trump being taken out. But it was, again, this reinforcement content was really peaking as we led up to Butler. And when that was going on, we were expecting it. We were talking about it that day. So when we're talking about this model having the ability to give you some indicator of what's to come, that's what we're describing here. We're extrapolating based on what is being pumped into the minds of the programmed. What's on the program? That's what I'm asking. So I'm not making predictions like the sky will fall on 11/11, or we're going to be, and I'm not putting forth anything like that. I'm saying based on what is being put into the minds of these large swaths of the population, they're being conditioned to accept something as inevitable. What is that something? And that's the kind of question we should be asking. And when we ask that question, we arrive at, oh, Trump's going to get it. We arrive at, it looks like we're being conditioned to accept some kind of disease X, mind viruses that necessitate censorship. It looks like we're being conditioned to accept the reality of fallout. You know, these are patterns. And hindsight is often 20/20 on this type of stuff, but you can read the curve under the presupposition that our history is pre-written and it's foreshadowed. And this bears out. The Charlie Kirk thing, one of the great psyops of all time, I think. This is like a JFK scale thing. But one of the things it has provided us is a window into the timeline of these things. Because logically speaking, and this is based on the very specific elements put into all of the concurrent programming for this event, it would tell us that the PSYOP script preceded Snake Eyes, the earliest example of Charlie Kirk foreshadowing, which means the event was scheduled 27 plus years ago. So we're talking about our collectively agreed upon worldview has elements that are planned 30 years in advance? Yes. Yes. The year 2055 is already scheduled, whatever is going to go down. And certain directors, certain writers, certain musicians are getting money, some kind of reward for inserting these ideas and themes into their content. And they may not have to know the full purpose of it. Like, hey, we need you to make a movie, and can you go ahead and blow up the Space Needle? Sure. We need you to make a movie. Can you go ahead and have some Islamic terrorists fly into a building? Like, so you can see how the specific components can be handed to any number of content creators, writers, directors, and they wouldn't have to know the full purpose of it. It was like, here's some puzzle pieces to put in your movie. It's product placement for fake events. Influencing people's opinions to accept things as inevitable. Steve Vasilev says, IPS, what's your take on that asteroid that's supposedly coming our way? Interesting question. I mean, obviously, anything is fakeable. They can fake it in the movies, they can fake it in real life. And, you know, Rosie O'Donnell said the strangest thing. She's organizing a blackout. She wants everybody to turn off, just shut down everything. Don't go to work, don't buy anything. She's organizing a blackout to shut down Trump's economy or something. And we were talking about this earlier. Rosie O'Donnell said something about the Butler shooting. She said it was hinky, which kind of sounds like John Hinckley Jr. Hinky. Jurassic Liars had pointed out that Rosie O'Donnell, who's always been in this dialectic with Trump ever since he called her a pig, that it contains Donald and Rose. Some interesting connections there, possibly, with the Hinckley thing, too. You know, Reagan's resurrection following the Hinckley shooting, all really does connect to Butler. If we get into the subtext of these things, Lord Laney says, if we keep using AI to pick apart the metascript, they're going to lobotomize it. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're using, I have Perplexity Pro. We're using Perplexity to start filling out, and we're going to engineer some AI bots, some AI agents to assist in this. We need to recreate a historic narrative of essentially mirroring the mainstream, but then also having a second column. This is the alternative version, as in the alternative media's version, and then the off-world stage perspective, because these are three distinct perspectives, which I describe as MSM, MSM plus, which are the subsets, and then MSM minus, the subtractive view, our view, the view from outside of the closed system. What's up, Mango Penguin? Thanks for joining. I'm not into doomsday predictions or any kind of idea that anything's going to end either. It doesn't end. We're not in the end times, but they would like you to think so, because if you think you're in the end times, I think they can get a little more out of you. Sense of urgency, you know, like FOMO. Gotta get your bunker. Gotta get with the right tribe. Gotta order your ammo and MREs. And with the advent of the nuke, they put us in the end times. If you believe in that, you have to believe we're in the end times. If you believe in planet-killing asteroids, you kind of have to be, that has to be included in your worldview. And these are what I'd call hyperstitions. Well, what are called hyperstitions, I think it's Baudrillard. He would describe what we live in right now as hyper-reality. And I think he would have arrived at similar conclusions to what we have. Were the nature of this echo chamber even accessible to an outsider at that time? The only reason we have any insight into this at all is, I think, because of things like September clues. And of course, Sandy Hook and similar events. And only because of social media has enabled the small subgroup of conspiracy theorists who notice fakery to fester. They didn't stamp this out. Because you know that media fakery isn't really discussed in the alternative media. We have to keep in mind that they've always been masquerading as, you know, closer to the truth because they call themselves truthers. Plain Dakota says, lately all this stuff sometimes gives me a despair feeling. I do feel oppressed as well as I go on the hamster wheel. It's just bread and circuses. You know, we're being entertained. They're entertaining us as a form of government. I mean, if you think about it, this might be utopia. I'm still reading, because I have like an addiction to books, but I read too many at a time. And right now I'm Now, in the second half of Hermann Hesse, The Glass Bead Game, Magister Ludi, Master of the Game, and it's about this future, this utopia. And what I find funny about it is that the main character's name is Joseph Connect, and he's always like, and the whole book is about this quote game, where it just seems like it's in this perfect future, and people just sit around talking about man's past and history, and they're connecting things, and it seems like they're reverse engineering, or it's all really about aesthetics, and it's very ivory tower. But anyway, looking at it, I see it as sort of comparable to what we're doing. And so I think of connect, like connect the dots. Like here we are looking at a psychological warfare zone that we know to be essentially simulated and fake. And kind of in a detached way, trying to come to an understanding of it all and making a game out of it. And that's kind of what I mean. It's like, I feel like, if anything, like this is a, not a game necessarily, and it's not that I'm doing it for entertainment, but it does have this quality to it. I don't know if that makes sense. Because I'm not saying I don't take it seriously, but in a way, it means that things aren't as serious as we would think. Like, isn't it good news that all those kids didn't get blasted at that school? Isn't it good news that we're not in the end times? Or that the thing in 2020 may not have been a thing? That it's safe to eat undercooked bat soup? So what exactly does this mean? Well, this is what the term ataraxia refers to, is peace of mind. So if the whole idea of psychological warfare is to put a war in your mind, then what does it mean to have stepped out of that mind war? Well, it means the opposite: quiescence, peace of mind. Like, I have peace of mind with regard to the world. Now, my own personal life may be different, but I've disconnected myself from giving too much time, or too much rather, bandwidth to things that I know to be illusory. Lowry says, Marcus Aurelius, we only have the present to keep it. Lord Laney says, at some point, I'm betting the king's jester realized he could usurp the king's throne by keeping him transfixed to their medieval play, bypassing him and becoming the new ruling jester cult. Yeah. Well, we're looking at Bread and Circus Clowns, and Bread and Circuses 2025. It's a more sophisticated iteration of what has been successfully used before and perfected. The New World Order isn't coming. That was one of Alex Jones's big things, was if we don't stop, it's going to happen. It's like, no, the New World Order is the old one. It's just the new iteration, like your iPhone. And every so often it gets updates. And the latest update is AI, generative AI. And generative AI has significant implications for mass perception, for trust in media, and possibly even the deliberate engineering of chaos so people demand stricter controls. You know, like that movie Equilibrium with Christian Bale, where the future, in order to maintain peace of mind, they have to get rid of all content, like all art. Everyone's just drugged, but anything inflammatory is just removed. And they've achieved equilibrium through psy-war. As Orwell said, war is peace. I would say psy-war is peace. Let's see what else we can discuss today. So the main topic today, history bending, is simply that there is a measurable, observable, long-term effect of fake news on what we call history. That the simulated events that are collectively agreed upon do in fact steer the worldview. And there is a worldview monopoly exerted through this influence, and the influence isn't merely limited to what they show us on their boring news channels, but they infuse it throughout the entire media ecosystem within entertainment. And they get us to accept the premise within entertainment, to pre-react and take sides in advance in the hypothetical, in the fictions, in the stories. So all of the stories that reach critical mass are there to bolster the history. And the history, of course, is according to a program, a script that is provably, demonstrably prepared decades in advance. And again, this is one of my themes lately, is it seems that there's a deliberate effort out there to prevent us from really going here. Because once you can stand on what you know, with regard to the structure of planted components relating to future fake events and how that process is repeated and how it goes up to the currently released content, once you see that, then you can definitively say, okay, the major events are pre-planned, like big kayfabe historic events. And knowing this, you can point to the influencers at work. And so I don't think that's something they want us to really think about. What does it mean when you could say, oh, well, Osama bin Laden didn't do 9/11. No, that was done by Kubrick, James Cameron, Tom Clancy, and about 1,000 other directors and writers who all prepared us for the event in advance. And the fake events can be looked at as myths. Like religions, they manufacture myths, manufacture histories. And then another point I've been making is that anybody focused on ancient history being tampered with, alternative models of history, mud flood theories, I think they're involved in a mass distraction campaign to distract us from looking at recent faked history. Because again, there's no culprits. There's no one who could be held accountable. There's no one that you can really point to when it comes to ancient history or a few hundred years back. But if we're looking at recent history and living directors and writers, well, yeah, at a minimum, they can be called sellouts. But for me, the question isn't really about whether or not they're going to suppress it, because I just don't know how far this information can really go. You know, are people prepared to accept it? I mean, to me, it's like, at this point, it's just common sense, you know, looking at media this way. You know, like you start a school year, and the teachers all talk in advance when are we going to have the fire drills, or if they're going to do a school shooting drill. Hey, on this day, we're going to have a school shooting drill. You plan these things in advance. It's not that difficult to imagine that major events require years of planning. And they can use drills to set the stage, to put components in place. I mean, that one of the other elements that we don't talk about enough is that the big fake events are often attended by, if not always, by drills that also eerily resemble it. So we talk about eerie coincidences in the entertainment. Let's talk about eerie coincidences in drills. You can't explain that away. That's another level to the pattern that diminishes the ability to wave it away as mere coincidence. Case in point, London bombing. London bombing was eerily mirrored by the BBC documentary that was about Islamic terrorism bombing the subway. During the bombing, there were two drills going on. Well, there's a drill and two tunnels. And the drill involved bombs. And the tunnels where the drills were happening are the exact tunnels where the actual bombs went off in the terror attack. So you got the entertainment version, you got the news event, and you have the drills. People ask, well, how could they have done 9/11 in the middle of broad daylight with all those people? How do you know those people were there? Because on that day, and this is, you can look it up, There were many dozens of drills going on. Well, a drill is a closed movie set. If you're doing a drill, people who aren't a part of it aren't in it. You see, it's a closed set. So you have dozens of closed sets. How hard is it going to be to maintain that seal? And the fact that these events are attended by drills also presupposes pre-planned. And drills would be an excellent cover to maneuver resources into place. And that's been the pattern. T. Ross says the audio sounds great, by the way. Oh, good. I'm outside. It's still nice out. And the phone's not overheating anymore. I think we're in the first day of Scorpio. Lord Laney says, dig up Edward Bernays and blame him. Yeah, it's fun to point out that Bernays is related to Sigmund Freud and the co-founder of Netflix. First CEO was their descendant, descended from the same family. Because Freud, we're talking about subconscious, what's beneath the hood. Edward Bernays, how to manipulate the masses as a mass. And then you find out that Netflix purchased all of your DMs and your browser histories for Facebook. Plain Decoded says, I had no awareness of any sort of alternative thinking about the way media consumed prior to 2008 or 7. Frank Castle says, is there anything besides newsbenders that shows that extreme point of view similar to it? You know, that's a good question. And I'm thinking not, but there could be. I discussed that book last night, In the Country of the Blind. In the Country of the Blind is about a small group that controls history. The Foundation series is out right now, and it has this element of future history. Not quite analogous, but it kind of gets there. But I think this is one of those banned ideas. And I think it's important to be able to entertain hypotheticals. Like, don't straw man the argument and say, oh, they're writing history in advance. That's impossible. That's ridiculous. And just kind of wave it away. Or who's they? They ask these questions like as though the question itself invalidates the premise. It's like, well, we don't have all the answers. We're just looking at the structure of it, the observable structure. And the existence of predictive programming contains the idea of foreshadowing, that if it's a reoccurring thing, then what we're seeing right now has some relevance to what's to come. And the relevance emerges through its influence on the programmed. We're being given scripts, essentially, through entertainment to get us to align with their future. I mean, it is really pretty much like advertising. There's a science to it. It's an art. Good One Day says, Newsbenders is probably a fluke that it got made and broadcasted. Right, I think so too. I mean, it's like Black Mirror stuff. They could probably put it into science fiction. But the idea that they're writing the news file. Okay, well, Wag the Dog. So Wag the Dog, actually, is a good example. Because Wag the Dog is not only about news bending, about PR stunts, about the government using Hollywood to manufacture events to influence public opinion, on the fly even. Like, okay, that right there is a pretty strong premise, and I think that it does show us something about the power of media and how media could serve government in such a way and warp the opinions of masses. But the movie also contained a storyline that mirrored the Monica Lewinsky Bill Clinton scandal and the subsequent reaction to the scandal, and Bill Clinton using the media to hype up some bombing near an area that affected ethnic Albanians. And in Wag the Dog, they manufactured a war in Albania in order to distract from the scandal. So you do have that, Wag the Dog. But Wag the Dog isn't like a one-off. It's not just an anomaly. That's the thing, too. These aren't anomalies. Inside Edition even commented on the crown jewels theft coinciding with Netflix. But it's not a random thing. It's actually a structural thing. And it's predictable. And I reiterate that it's predictable. I said, if the Charlie Kirk thing is fake, we're going to see this. And we saw that. I said, if this thing is fake, we're going to see relevant, contemporary, concurrent programming in some mass media outlet. So the predictability of it and the way that we've been extrapolating from what's happening in the now continues to vindicate our model. And our model is essentially the recognition that the world stage exists. It's a closed system. It's a selective worldview, representative of a monopoly. And it's built upon the presupposition that what came before is essentially true. Like, we're just looking at the architecture of the Truman Show. And no, the Truman Show is not going to end. It can end for you individually. Dave movie 2. Yeah, King Ravana, the good one. Dave movie. That's the one where the body double has to take over for the president. Is that the one? Like, I sometimes entertain the hypothetical that our president is essentially a figurehead. I mean, in a way it really is. If you think about this thing as just a big show. But too valuable a character for some random, just the vagaries of fate, maybe a heart attack or car wreck. You can't just have someone like that die. Not if it's a historic personage that has to last a certain duration. So you would need to have body doubles on hand. They have to be replaceable. And if they're replaceable, if they're a construct, it's not a position of real power. It could therefore be essentially played by any number of actors. All right, so here we are, 72 people live, 10/22/2025. We're discussing history bending. History bending is the only real conspiracy. All the other conspiracy theories are part of a meta-conspiracy, which is to keep you locked up on rabbit trails that are paved, pre-paved, not new, not leading you off world stage. The only real conspiracy is history bending, and it's accomplished by news bending. With the complicity of the public, which is largely engineered, consent is manufactured via the mechanism of bread and circuses, entertainment. But the only real conspiracy is a successful conspiracy, and it's conspicuous that none of the conspiracy theorists have noticed it. And we point it out, and they don't want to hear it. Conspiracy theorists who live in this realm of questioning everything, but never really settling. It's always vague. They're always in the fog of Psywar. But they're the last ones to want to entertain the idea that there's a present ongoing conspiracy that we can all point at. Frank Castle says, best info available, always cutting edge. Thank you, Tim. I will champion your work until I die. Hey, I appreciate that. I will too. I'm 100% committed to this thing, the think tank. And the work of the think tank is going to go now in the direction of imposing the MSM standards on Trutherville. And they can't take it. There's no... We're outside of their purview, outside of their realm of experience, and they only have the assumption that they're correct. And their assumption is built upon an edifice of lies. And I'm not trying to change the minds of the influencers, but we're destroying the credibility of the guardrails they defend. And if they're still defending these guardrails after we've incinerated them, then they just look very questionable. But we know that there are enough people among their audiences who are deprogrammed enough to understand the premise of off-world stage, who would then make that exodus. And if you're not off-world stage, you can't fake it. Noticing conspiracies, noticing psyops isn't enough. If you cannot connect the psyop to the broader media ecosystem and the psy war and the long-term effects of concerted news manipulation, then you have not recognized the model. And if you have not recognized the model and its program, then you can't step outside of it. We coined the term metascript, and we've appropriated world stage in order to articulate this, because we are indeed a separate demographic that has never been platformed. And the next phase is increasing the number of people who are taking the off-world stage perspective. And now that we have a strong core and we've codified this, that's why I put out the book, Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed, A Skeptic's Guide to the Theater of Psy-War. There are enough of us that now we can expand numbers-wise without losing quality, because those who know and understand it will police it. We have to police it, and it's just going to be done naturally. And those who are not off-world stage anyway will want nothing to do with it. They will bitterly cling to their guardrails and their orthodoxies and their narratives. They will not leave the political horseshoe. And I say, yeah, leave them to it. Have your Q-pipe, snort your red pills, drink the Kool-Aid at Alex Jonestown, or have a blue pill. Like, it's none of our business. We're not proselytizing. But if you want to live in objective reality and get out of the divergence, if you want to exit the Truman Show, yeah, just look past the pile of ashes where all these guardrails were, and you'll see it. What's up, Psyop Sidecar? Mango Penguin says, our spirit animals know everything. Yeah, our spirit animal is the penguin. And the penguin is the outsider in the sense that it's at the bottom of the ball or the edge of the pizza disc, flat earth, or however you want to look at it. But they exist in a harsh environment, on the fringe, the deepest diving birds. They maintain heat by conspiring, by breathing together in a huddle. And on the water, they form into rafts. And I describe this as a raft because we remain buoyant on the sea of irrelevance, the sea of misinformation, which submerges everyone else. And if you're not on the raft, it's because you're not buoyant. And if you're not buoyant, it's because you've got red pills in your pocket. You've got propaganda elements that keep you rooted on the world stage, that keep you immersed in that alternative. I think Truman Show is one of the best analogies. It's just a world framed by certain lies and presuppositions. Baudrillard called it hyper-reality, where fiction and fact have been so merged that they're indistinguishable. And if you think about the psyop-informed worldview the average person has, yeah, that definition fits. It's hyper-reality. Psyop Sidecar, did you get the images I sent you? Oh, I'll check those out when I get back in. My phone battery is about to die, so I want to say thanks, everyone, for your comments and your thoughts. We're going to continue to flesh out these ideas. I'm working on a 45-minute breakdown of the world stage, history bending, the PsyopEntertainment Complex, in a way that will be intelligible to anybody and hopefully entertaining. So this is just me kind of getting some ideas out because I think it's very important that we consolidate it all. And I'll use that as a basis for my book promotional events. And that's kind of the next stage. So thanks for joining. We'll talk again soon. Lean Dion says propaganda anchors. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Go to ips.monster and subscribe to the newsletter. I set up a Chromebook that I have, so I'm going to try to get the archives put back up. I'm in this transitional period, but things will be stabilized as soon as I get into an office space, and it'll just be a matter of weeks.